This is Ros Jones, your business coach with my weekly podcast show, Bold Business Bits, coming to you from Yorkshire. This is where I have a great conversation with a phenomenal female business boss. We share some of the bold stuff they do, lessons they've learnt, adversities they've overcome, and the fun they have. And then I'll be dipping into my toolkit and sharing a top tip. Business can be lonely, so make sure you join us each week and be part of our show. So hello and welcome to the Bold Business Bits podcast show. This is Ros Jones and today I'm joined by Nat McMillan of McMillan Associates. Hello, Nat.
Hi, Ros. Nice to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. So, Nat, we've spoken a bit before, but tell me a bit about your business, please, and how you came to set it up.
Yeah, so the business, I always say, we're a bit like Ron Seal. We do what we say on the tin. We're an HR business, so we do the whole suite of HR that you would expect, from basic employment contract through to mediation, conflict, policies, employee relations, all of that. And the other side of the business is we do a lot around development, organisational development. So we might work with business owners about their leadership style. We might work with boards about their leadership style and career coaching. So those are the main parts of our business. In terms of why I decided to set it up, I set it up nearly 2.5 years ago. Been a whirlwind, I'm sure, as most business owners will tell you. A wonderful whirlwind, but it is a roller coaster. There were two really big events in my life that led me to set up my own business. I think, like many people, I'd always wanted to, but probably needed a couple of life-changing events to really make me take that leap, if you like, that jump. So one was my son had played football at an elite level for a number of years, and he got scouted by a championship side when he was 14, and he wanted to do it. It was always his choice, not ours. And at that point, I was a chief executive, and there is just no way, even though they were very flexible in how I worked, there's just no way I felt I could commit to both my son's ambitions and my ambitions within that business. So I thought, okay, now is probably a good time to look at more of a work-life agile way of working. And the second thing really that had been playing on my mind, I'd been ready to move on anyway, because I had become frustrated and, if I'm honest, a bit disillusioned about the difference in how I felt I was being held to account and performance managed compared to my male predecessor. So just to give you some context, when I'd stepped into that role, we'd just been rated inadequate by the CQC.
Wow.
I was doing a huge turnaround program and we were succeeding, and we had done a lot. I won't go into boring everyone about the CQC, but when you have a regulator breathing down your neck in health, it is extremely stressful. But we made a lot of progress. Actually, it's been rated as good now.
Oh, wow.
And yet I felt that my male predecessor was not held to account. I very much felt as a female I was. And you know, Ross, having spoken to me, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, for me, this is some of the things that we don't call out, the difference in how people are treated. I'm particularly strong in wanting to talk to people about female leadership, but equally I have a passion for any underrepresented people and diversity. But really, I feel I've got a voice because of my own experience of being a female leader. So again, I thought, I want to set up my own business. I want to do more. I want to be able to talk much more openly and do more of that public speaking around women and fulfilling their potential.
Fantastic. So how long had you worked where you were before in your career? Because you'd worked your way up to chief exec. You must have been around for a while, or very driven and ambitious.
Probably both, Ros, probably around a while and ambitious. So I've worked across all sectors, and that's another thing I'd just say to people is don't believe that rubbish that you have to stick with one sector. So I've worked in manufacturing, I've worked in automotive, I've worked in the NHS, I support not-for-profit, charity, SMEs. You can work across all sectors. Yeah. And yes, I'd worked my way up to HR director and up to chief executive. So yeah, I've got, about 17 years experience across HR and OD, and obviously operational experience in manufacturing prior to that.
Wow. And when you first set up that, did you have a clear vision of what you wanted to do, what your businesses were going to look like?
I was going to say yes and no, which is always a bit of a strange answer, but it's true. I was always clear that I wanted to be able to provide straightforward commercial HR advice. It was always a frustration throughout my career of people giving too much jargon, waffle, overcomplicating it. So I'm very much a Yorkshire brand, and I am renowned for speaking quite bluntly and quite directly. But I really wanted to help SMEs get really good, practical HR advice that would make a difference to them. So that bit I was absolutely clear about. The bit I was less clear about was how kind of corporate and my identity as a business. I felt that I wanted to be quite corporate because I think that's me and my natural style. But I probably played around a little bit, certainly in the first 12 to 18 months. So I tried to be probably a little bit more funky. It didn't really suit me. I came back to, actually, I am naturally quite a corporate person, you know, in the way I dress, in the way I behave. And so I think I'm very comfortable about that's me. That's kind of the clothes I feel comfortable wearing, if you know what I mean, the skin I'm in.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways I knew what I wanted to do and my overall goal. But I think I've been quite comfortable at trying on a few different things and experimenting over that first year or two as to exactly what I wanted to look like. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I absolutely get that. And the lockdown made a difference in terms of not being in front of people in person. And I asked that question because I came from a professional background, corporate, professional, and it was always suits. You know, I worked in London, it was always suits. And so I carried that on in my coaching. But since lockdown, I've actually changed the way I dress. You know, not just because of Zoom, but just because I've found clothes that I prefer to wear. And it makes me feel that I've found my own sort of identity through the clothes I wear now. Has that made any difference to you? No.
I know what you mean. I think it's quite different on Zoom. I mean, I've kind of had a joke with a few people about kind of tabletop dressing.
Yeah.
So, you know, where maybe I've still got my gym stuff on the bottom half, which is always quite funny. But yes, I think it has allowed people to be a bit more comfortable about showing their whole self, you know, and to be okay with who they are rather than, as you say, having to wear something. So I quite like dressing corporately. That's actually what I've learned is almost the opposite of, actually, I don't really like being dressed down, even if I'm working at home on my laptop. Yeah. I actually quite like being dressed for work. But it's about learning what works for you, isn't it? And I know other people that have gone, do you know, it's great. I can actually sit in a pair of jeans and a top. I feel much more comfortable working. It's about whatever makes you more productive. And I think people have almost had a permission to maybe push them boundaries.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting. It's interesting. So I love that story of just being able to, of just walking away from that corporate. Was it difficult? Did you just sort of say, I'm leaving, or what was the situation?
Yeah, I kind of bounced it around in my head for a month or two. I don't think you should ever react and make a decision in the moment. So I kind of sat with it for a couple of months and thought, yeah, I'm going to do this. At some point, you've got to make a decision. So I almost gave myself a deadline of, I'm going to make a decision by the end of April. So I gave myself 2 months. And at that point, I held myself to account on it and thought, no, I'm going to do it. I had lots of people tell me I was crazy to walk away from such a good salary and security and all of that. But I knew it's what I wanted to do. A big driver for me was that I wanted to be in control of my own destiny. So I wanted to have the values that were my values. And with your own business, you can choose how you want to do business, can't you? And a core value of mine is integrity, which goes back to me saying at the beginning, I wanted to give SMEs really practical advice that could make a difference. I often go into SMEs and I'll say, you don't need all of this. You know, if you're only employing 10 people, you do not need 30 policies on employment law. And I'm sorry for any solicitors listening, but you just don't. You need a good employment contract and a good handbook. That's it. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to almost cut through some of the jargon. I don't believe in making money for money's sake. That is not what drives me and motivates me. It's about being able to really help a business. And when you walk away, see that you've helped someone to move on.
Yeah.
I think that's just so important.
Yeah. And what's the number one thing that you love about your business?
People.
People.
And you would expect me to say that given the field that I'm in. But I have to say I've worked with a number of HR professionals where I've sometimes wondered if they actually have any people skills, which is always highly ironic. You know, there's a lot about knowing yourself. And I've alluded to the fact that I do a lot of work with leaders about, you know, what motivates them, what their style is. How do you know enough about yourself? And I've done a lot of that, you know, as you would expect over the last 15 to 20 years. And I know why lockdown's been hard for me, because I like to be out and about. I like to physically be with people. I get my energy from people. And that's what I love doing. I love coming away and feeling that I've made a difference, that I've added a value, that I had a coaching conversation with a lady last week, and it was amazing. She's actually made some real changes that have, in her words, have transformed how she's working.
Yeah.
That's what makes it worthwhile for me. You know, that's what I love doing. But equally, that's why lockdown's been so hard for me. It's great we can do things over the phone, on Zoom, on Teams, and all of that. But for me, it isn't a substitute. You know, I would love Roz to be sitting us two with a cup of coffee opposite each other in a room.
I would too. Yeah, I'd love that. One day. So I know there's another aspect of your business, Nat, that you focus on, which is in particular for women. Can you tell me a bit more about that? Women and power.
Yes, so I'm part of faculty in some national programs which kind of support women who want to get into senior leadership roles. Mm-hmm. And so one of the modules that I run is Women and Power. And I am going to be running this workshop at the end of April, an open one for people to come and be part of. It's just a half day. But what I often find is that women have these limiting beliefs around power. They can be afraid to use it. I talk about being able to step into power, to be comfortable with it and know how to use it. And I really help people to understand how we've become conditioned in society, even way back to the Greeks, Roz. It's been going on that long. And the reason I do it is because so many times we're completely blind to it. Yeah. We don't actually see it because it's just part of everyday life. So a really simple example I'll give. When I was a chief exec, my husband actually worked part-time. I worked full-time and then some. But whenever there was anything that happened at school, the school rang me, even though I was second on the list. My husband was the first. They rang me.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
They only rang me because I was the mum and I was female, and I'm immediately assumed to be the caregiver. Yeah. You'll see it in workplaces where there is an assumption that if there's a school closure because of snow, it's usually that it's the women that jump. We know during lockdown, women have been affected much more proportionately than men. Women have tended to take on most of the homeschooling. But again, a lot of women don't actually see this. And as well as kind of opening people's eyes, I like to give people actual practical tips on what to do, how to be assertive, and not to be afraid that in being assertive, you're going to be called bossy, or aggressive, because that's what happens when women say what they want or what they need in a meeting. They usually get negative feedback. Whereas for a man to do it, that's just a man being bold.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's like I guess that was politics as well, but I just immediately thinking of Maggie Thatcher, our first women prime minister. I mean, what a thing to achieve, to be the first woman prime minister, whether she was a Tory or whatever other political party. But the fact that, she was then sort of ridiculed slightly, wasn't she, in terms of her, because she was powerful and she was determined and driven. So, but yeah, very interesting.
And remember, the jokes became about a handbag.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Theresa May, how many times did we hear about what flipping shoes she wore? Yeah. But just history, I know, feminists talk about it being his story,
Yeah.
but women have been written out of history. And so a small fact, which I talk about a bit more when I do the Women in Power module, is the Russian Revolution was not started by the Bolsheviks. It was started by women.
Wow, didn't know that, actually.
Very few people do. But if you look in history, Lenin wasn't even in Russia at the time. The Bolsheviks weren't even there. It was a women's movement.
Yeah, interesting. And so how do people find out more about this particular workshop, or will you be running them on a regular basis? Where do they go, and what do they have to put in their diary, and how do they get in touch with you about that?
Yeah, so I'm going to hopefully be firming up the date. It's going to be in April. I will be sharing it on LinkedIn, so anybody can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter at Nat_female leaders. Yeah, so people will see me on social media, follow me, find out about me. And if you want to subscribe to newsletters, again, you can drop me an email at natmcmillan.hrnod@gmail.com.
Brilliant. I think it'll be a very interesting session. Well, I know it will be a very interesting session and empowering. So what's next for you then, apart from your Women in Power? What's next for your business, Nat?
Well, very excitingly for me on a personal level, I've just been appointed to an NHS board as a non-exec director. So really important for me that we have women continuing to aspire to be at board level. Obviously, it's not a full-time role because I've got my business. I'm hoping to keep growing my business. I'd really like to look at employing some apprentices. It was another driver really to set up my business. Social inequality is another big thing for me. I think we talk a lot about Black Lives Matter in the last few years. We've seen the impact around schools closing on people from more deprived backgrounds. I actually want to be able to offer an apprenticeship to somebody that's from a kind of less privileged background. So I'd like to be able to do that and really give someone an opportunity, because I firmly believe that something that holds people back is actually self-belief and knowing that you deserve something and you're as good as anybody else.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And what about for people, say there's a woman standing before you now, Nat, asking for one piece of advice about setting up their business. What would your advice be?
Be true to yourself. It sounds a bit of a cliche, but cliches are there for a reason. Get advice from lots of other people, look at other businesses, listen, take it on board, ask for help. But also don't forget who you are and almost stick to and use the kind of values that you have within you and tread your own path, because it'll work for you. It'll be fine.
I love that. When you say tread your own path, so how do people know if they're on their right path, their true path?
Well, probably some of it is, like I said, experimenting with some things.
Yeah.
I think not feeling like you've got to copy someone else. We're all unique and we're all individual. So learn from someone else, but don't try and be exactly like somebody else, and be comfortable with yourself. I think during lockdown, a real lesson that's come to me is I am naturally quite self-assured. I've done a lot of development. I know myself very well. And when everyone was panicking at the beginning of lockdown, I just took a deep breath and thought, it's going to be okay. I'm going to do it my own way. I'm not going to jump into pivoting within 2 days. I'm not going to panic and suddenly set up my own takeaway food business. You'll have seen it as well. There was almost this urgency of quick, do something.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I'm okay, actually. I'm just going to pause for a couple of weeks and see what comes to me, and it'll be okay. And it was. So I think that's what I'd say is have confidence in yourself and do what you want to do, because of course then you're motivated, aren't you, Ros? You're much more likely to see something out when you believe in it and when it's something you're natural and is your true self.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think sometimes we feel so much obligation. So we feel obliged to be, selling PPE or whatever it is that we had to do immediately to do something. Whereas taking that time out, which a lot of people have had to in this time anyway, just to be still. And, that's sometimes when all your best ideas just bubble up, isn't it? When you just take some time to be still.
Yeah, definitely. I talk a lot about if you feel you're almost forcing it, So I'll recognise that behaviour. In fact, just last week, I found myself suddenly, a couple of things got moved out with some NHS clients, understandably. And so I had a couple of days that were quieter and I thought, right, I've got to do something. I started to fall into that mind trap of, well, I've got to do something. I've got to be busy. Maybe I should contact people, try and chase it, try and find some other work. And then just thought, what are you doing? Just stop. So actually, I had the afternoon off. I ended up baking. It was lovely. And guess what? I got 2 emails from 2 clients that wanted some work doing. So I think you're right. Sometimes we feel that we've got to be constantly in action.
Yeah.
And we don't. And as you say, often when I'm out walking and not thinking about the business is when I have my light bulb moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I don't know whether that's this country or whether it's a human thing or just being in business generally. It's just like, when you go to network and things and the first question somebody asks is, are you busy? And you think, no, I don't want to be busy. I want to have a business that works without me. I want to be productive, but I don't want to be busy. It's like busy. So yeah, it's interesting. Everybody wants to have some work to do, but so Nat, 2.5 years in, what about 10 years from now? Any thoughts?
Oh, yes, definitely. So 10 years from now, I will have someone else in running the business day to day.
Excellent.
Very clear about that. I set up a business to have a business, not to have me on a freelance.
Being busy.
Yeah, being busy.
Yeah.
So yes, I would still absolutely want to be involved. I see myself very much as having a long career, but more part-time and more strategic, I suppose, rather than the day-to-day of the business. I don't want to be a huge, take over the world kind of business, just a nice balance. But I would certainly like to have a business that operates still across North Yorkshire and that has grown, and confidently, that will continue to be renowned for the straightforward commercial HR advice that makes a difference.
Fantastic. And so before we finish, so I'm sure lots of people will want to know this, and I guess it will have been curtailed a bit during this time, but what happened to your son's career?
Well, really interestingly, he decided that a professional footballer was not for him. He didn't like the monotony of it. He didn't like the fact that you're very much told just to do one thing over and over again in a game, and he wanted to be able to think for himself. And he also recognised that he was beginning to feel unhappy and was concerned that it might have an impact on his mental health.
Wow.
So he very maturely, just before 16, spoke to us about it. And so we said, well, it's up to you. And if you're not happy, don't do it. So he stepped back. So he does football coaching, and he continues to play where he enjoys it.
Yeah, that's a great story. And also, but thank goodness, because he was half the catalyst for you leaving and setting up your business. So that's great, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a win-win.
Yeah, win-win. Well, thank you so much, Nat. It's been great speaking with you today, and thank you very much. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks, Roz.
In our conversation, we talked about the principle of a win-win mentality. And it reminded me of Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. His habit number 4 is think win-win. So I went back to that book just to look more at the concept of win-win, because we talk about it a lot, but what does it actually mean? Most people, Stephen Covey says, are deeply scripted in what he calls a scarcity mentality. They see life as having only so much, as though there were only one pie out there. And if someone were to get a big piece of the pie, it would mean less for everybody else. The scarcity mentality is a zero-sum model of life. People with a scarcity mentality have a very difficult time sharing recognition and credit, power or profit, even with those who help in the production. They also have a very hard time being genuinely happy for the successes of other people, even and sometimes especially members of their own family or close friends and associates. It's almost as if something is being taken from them when someone else receives special recognition or windfall gain or has remarkable success or achievement. Although they might verbally express happiness for other success, inwardly they're eating their hearts out. Their sense of worth comes from being compared, and someone else's success, to some degree, means their failure. Only so many people can be A students. Only one person can be number 1. To win simply means to beat. Often people with a scarcity mentality harbour secret hopes that others might suffer misfortune, not terrible misfortune, but acceptable misfortune that would keep them in their place. They're always comparing, always competing. They give their energies to possessing things or other people in order to increase their sense of worth. They want other people to be the way they want them to be. They often want to clone them, and they surround themselves with yes people, people who won't challenge them, people who are weaker than they are. It's difficult for people with a scarcity mentality to be members of a complementary team. They look on differences as signs of insubordination and disloyalty. Win-win, on the other hand, sees life as a cooperative arena, not a competitive one. Win-win is a frame of mind and heart that constantly seeks mutual benefits in all human interactions. Win-win means agreements or solutions that are mutually beneficial and satisfying. Stephen Covey says that character is the foundation of win-win. A person or a company of any type that approaches conflicts with a win-win attitude possesses 3 character traits. Number 1, integrity, so conforming to your true feelings, values and commitments. Maturity, expressing your ideas and feelings with courage and consideration for the ideas and feelings of others. And an abundance mentality, believing there is plenty for everyone. Many people think in terms of either or, either you're nice or you're tough. But win-win requires you to be both. To go for win-win, you not only have to be empathic, you have to be confident. You not only have to be considerate and sensitive, you have to be brave. To do that, to achieve that balance between courage and consideration for others, is the essence of real maturity and is fundamental to win-win. If you're high on courage and low on consideration, how will you think? Win-lose. You'll be strong and ego-bound. You'll have the courage of your convictions, but you won't be very considerate of others. You'll borrow strength from your position and power or from your credentials, your role, your seniority. If you're high on consideration and low on courage, you'll think lose-win. You'll be so considerate of others' feelings that you won't have the courage to express your own. High courage and consideration are both essential to win-win. It's the balance of the two that is the mark of real maturity. If you have it, you can listen and you can empathically understand, but you can also courageously confront. So here's the thing. See how much you have a win-win habit. Score yourself from a 1 to 10 on these 3 things. Number 1, I care about the success of others as well as my own. How do you rank yourself between 1 and 10? I cooperate with others. How do you score yourself on 1 to 10? And number 3, when solving conflicts, I strive to find solutions that benefit all. How do you rate yourself between 1 and 10? Hope you've enjoyed this show. This is Ros Jones from Bold Business Bits. I'll speak to you next time, but please subscribe and share our show. Bye for now. This has been your Ros Jones Bold Business Bits podcast show. If you'd like any further information about anything we've discussed today, please just get in touch. Go to businesscoachingyorkshire.co.uk. Please join me again next week when I'll be speaking with another phenomenal female business boss with bold business bits. And remember to subscribe to my show. Thanks for listening.